Hello indie game fans, October is coming, so you know what that means, cozy games galore. Yes, nothing else to see here, with it being another great month with a little bit of a lull in the middle due to the Steam Mix Festival, so the best upcoming releases begins with Ember Isle, a charming live sim title in which you run a shop on an island, gathering resources, crafting items and selling them for profit. All this in service of befriending the local paleo folk, restoring the village and uncovering the secrets of the island, looking so charming and delightful. Games from developer Sky Devil Palm always catch my eye due to the pixel art and vibrant colours used, with their next title being Victory Heat Rally, an arcade racing title with a throwback look and feel. Drifting is central to the game, and with 12 drivers, each having their own vehicle, which are different in how they control, should provide plenty of replayability, looking like a great time where there has been somewhat of a racing game revival in indie games in recent months, so leave a comment below if you want a separate video on those. This video is brought to you by Creatures of War, a side-scrolling action platformer with survival horror elements, where you come face to face with primal terrors, including dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures. Your mission? Find and extract the missing members of Delta Squad, who were sent to investigate the island, but their helicopter went missing with fears that it was shot down. As you explore the diverse biomes of the island, you will encounter ferocious creatures, capturing the feel of what it would actually be like coming face to face with a dinosaur. While you do have guns and weapons, it will still be a desperate struggle for survival, so you need to be cautious and not just go in guns blazing. There are survival horror elements of scavenging for limited ammo and weapons and searching for clues in abandoned buildings while trying not to get killed. I have a soft spot for dinosaur-themed games, so of course this got my attention, with there currently being a demo available on Steam, so go play that and wishlist the game via the link in the description below. I was a little bit surprised to see Monomyth on the list of new releases since I last covered this when talking about first-person shooters and RPGs, where I have not heard much about it since then, and suddenly its early access release is nigh. This is a first-person dungeon crawler that has you exploring an ancient fortress, having both melee and ranged combat options at your disposal, including sword, mace, bow, and even magic. The action is in real time, so it is not a Legend of Grimrock-like party-based RPG, but rather you are controlling movement, dodging, and attacking. First-person melee can have quite a janky feel if they don't get the physics and feedback right, so hopefully that's not the case, with the game having a decent amount of hype behind it as well. Fighting game fans, this one's for you. One of my most anticipated titles releases next month, where the complaint around this game is that it didn't create a Steam page until very late in development, wasting potentially years of wishlists of the game. So let's see how Blazing Strike does at launch. This is a throwback pixel art 2D fighter that looks to bring us back to a simpler time, having 14 unique playable characters which are quite different and look fun to play as. This is rather ambitious since other indie fighting games, think Them's Fighting Herds for example, had only 6 characters at launch, where the game gets exponentially more difficult to balance the more characters you have. While not a fighting game expert, if you're in the mood for something that is not Street Fighter, Tekken or Mortal Kombat, this might be of interest. The English language release of the not-so-indie cozy game Shin, Shiro and the Cold Town is of note, being the follow-up to Shin, Me and the Professor on Summer Vacation, The Endless 7-Day Journey, which stars the titular character, Crayon Shin, who has an extensive range of manga and anime behind it. However, this is a cozy title that sees you playing as this 5-year-old boy doing kid stuff like running around, catching bugs and fishing, farming, foraging and more, but has 2 locations to explore, a Japanese village as well as Cold Town, having to help the locals in both areas. This is an absolutely gorgeous title, and like its predecessor, looks like a joy to play, so if you're in the mood for warm, fuzzy vibes, this is the game for you. On the other end of the spectrum of warm and fuzzy is the eldritch horror city builder Worshippers of Cthulhu, where you lead a cult worshipping the cosmic deity, having to awaken Cthulhu to bring about the next age of humanity. There are the standard city building mechanics, like ensuring buildings are connected by roads and having to manage various resource production chains, but of course with an added dose of dark rituals and human sacrifice, using these to unlock arcane knowledge to enhance and expand the city. You can even interact with non-believers, choosing whether or not to conquer or pillage them, all in service of awakening the Great Old One, and looks pretty good.
2. You can be nice to real people.
The pendulum swings all the way back around the other end again with kind words to Lo-Fi City Pop, the sequel to a game from 2019 which was pretty heartwarming, in which you could type your worries into an in-game letter, send it out into the ether, and on the other end, anonymously read and respond to these, with hopes of creating a kinder world where you say nice things to strangers. The sequel expands the play area, allowing you to leave your cozy room to explore the city and to interact with other characters, and it's just wholesome vibes all around. From what I played of the original, the moderation was surprisingly good, so you don't get randos attacking you, for example, so hopefully that is locked down here as well, and it's a great example of how games can do good in the world. Another not-so-indie title of interest is Starship Troopers Extermination, a 16-player co-op first-person shooter that has you taking on the bugs, using the notable Starship Troopers IP that you might be familiar with from the books, animated series, or movie, which releases out of early access next month. The curious thing about this 1.0 launch is that it is in the wake of Helldivers 2, another game that has a very similar vibe both in terms of tone and gameplay, although the 16 versus 4 player distinction is interesting to note. It has done decently well in the 1.5 years of early access, gathering 25,600 Steam reviews as of recording, with negative reviews primarily complaining about technical issues, but for the most part, it's a PvE type experience to jump into with friends, with the 1.0 launch of course adding more content, including a solo play mode which should give it more longevity. Yes, Vampire Survivors clones are overdone at this point, but this next title looks like it had some amount of work going into it rather than being a cheap clone, in which the gimmick of NIMRODS GunCraft Survivor is of course crafting your own guns. This means that you're able to swap out parts on your weapons to experiment and figure out the most overpowered combination with a good pixel art look as well. The developer of Botworld Odyssey reached out and I wanted to help them along, since this open world monster taming RPG looks cute and has potential, so I hope it doesn't go under the radar. This has real-time tactical combat, in which you are placing your bots in an arena to do battle. Similar to games like Arco, the action pauses when you are issuing commands or aiming attacks, which then plays out in real time, but as a fan of monster taming games, this is certainly of interest. I'm also interested in the overall structure of the game, since there is an open world to explore with rare bots to collect, but otherwise does look very Pokemon-like in nature. So I don't see additional elements like base building like in Yaoling Mythical Journey for example, but still, for a more focused kind of title, this should be pretty decent. Now this title came out of nowhere and has 27,000 Steam followers as of recording, which translates to a huge number of Steam wishlists and anticipation for Dread Dawn. Yes, another zombie survival sandbox title, but people really do love their zombie games. In many ways, this kind of looks like Project Zomboid, but with a slightly different art style, where in zombie survival game fashion, you are scavenging for resources in order to survive, establishing your base to be a little bit self-sustaining, as well as to give you an advantage when you have to defend it against the zombie hordes. It seems like they're able to generate a huge swarm of zombies as well, which can be pretty thrilling, so I expect this game to do very well in terms of sales. Another long in development title makes it to launch in AWAKEN Astral Blade, a grimdark Metroidvania entry that looks to have great action. I believe the developer is out of China, with parts of the description of the Steam store page looking like it was Google translated or something, so it's a little difficult to get the gist of the plot, but I'll try, in which you play as some sort of android or bionic girl as they call it, having to rescue members of a missing investigative team sent to some islands, where some sort of mysterious energy source has mutated the animals and plants into dangerous monsters. There's an ancient civilization and you're tracking down the source of said energy back to a place known as the Altar of Eternity, so begins our adventure. But if you're a fan of the genre like me, you'll know what to expect. After a little bit of a delay, we also have the early access release of Guild Saga Vanished Worlds, a turn-based tactical RPG in which you play as a fledgling member of the Heroes Guild who, on your first mission, find your ship capsized by a mysterious maelstrom and awaken on an unknown island, having to fight pirates, ferocious creatures, and even alchemists along the way. This is a tactical RPG like Final Fantasy Tactics with a decent pixel art look. Although the characters do look a little bit too vertically stretched to me, with plenty of customization options for your main character and party, from the different classes or disciplines that they can train in, to equipment, character race, and more. Companions also have their own backstory and motivations, which you will get to know through the course of the game, with the grander story being set in the world of political turmoil over a newly discovered continent and the land grab it causes in the various factions around the world. The early access release includes part of the first chapter of the story mode, but also has 100 skills spread across 10 schools and hundreds of different pieces of equipment and items, with early access planned for 12 to 24 months. If you love classic PS2 era JRPGs, do I have a title for you in Sky Ocean's Wings for Hire, a game that looks to be paying tribute to Skies of Arcadia, since you play as the leader of a ragtag group of sky pirates on their adventures across the world as they take on an organization known as the Alliance. The Studio Ghibli-inspired visuals look awesome, combining expressive character portraits with a neat polygonal look. While it is about dogfighting in planes, combat is turn-based, so this is a Japanese-style turn-based RPG through and through, and will be for fans of the genre.
Going to be tough.
Didn't think I'll leave you in October without a horror game, did you? We have the release of a highly anticipated survival horror title in Post-Trauma that has you playing as not some handsome police officer, but a tormented train conductor instead, who finds himself in a surreal dimension where everything is going wrong. That means weird tentacles everywhere and monsters lurking in the hallways, being a classic survival horror game through and through, of having to gather key items, solve puzzles and escape, with some combat elements as you struggle against the nightmares. It looks impressive and is very grotesque, perfect for a game like this, so hopefully it will live up to the expectations of fans of the genre. I love contrasting games with wildly different vibes, since it just goes to show the range of indie games as a whole, where Fruit Bus is the exact opposite of Post-Trauma mentioned earlier. This is a first-person road trip cooking adventure game where you explore the world in your food truck, driving around and gathering ingredients, and then setting up shop and serving your customers. It's warm and cozy, with the cooking mechanics being a little bit more in-depth than I expected, which is a good thing, so there's plenty to fiddle around with in this game. I do wonder what the larger story or end goal of the game is, if it would be bugsnax like in nature, but so far there's been no indication of any of that, so we'll have to see.
The secrets of presenting the perfect suit.
Here's another Metroidvania of interest in Anima Flux, a sci-fi entry this time around with a curious co-op focus. Yes, it is designed for 2 players, although it should still work for 1, where you play as a genetically enhanced soldier of a regime sent to the only human city left in order to help fight the mutants. The action looks good as expected for a moody sci-fi Metroidvania, but having a slightly faster feel to the game as compared to something like Ghost Song, for for example, with the co-op twist being the most interesting part, although that may be a double-edged sword in some ways that puts players off if they don't have a player too. Another gorgeous title is the 3D exploration adventure game Europa, where you play as an android on Jupiter's moon, making your way around these stunning landscapes in search of answers. While the game looks gorgeous, there might be a more sinister undertone since it is described as a fallen utopia and you are discovering the story of the last human alive. So what happened to the rest of them? Well, I'll leave that to you to find out, but hands down, this is one of the prettiest games that I have ever seen. I don't believe there's combat, so it is just traversal, platforming if you can call it that, and puzzles, so I hope that the gameplay part of it is satisfying enough to keep you going. Speaking of beautiful games, you might notice a visual similarity between this game and another notable indie, since yes indeed, Niva is from the developer of Grease, both being gorgeous hand-drawn action platformers, but with this looking to have a little bit more action as compared to the puzzle focus of their previous game. You play as a young woman who has a lifelong bond with a wolf as they adventure through a dying world. Nomada Studios is known for their visuals and I expect nothing less from them, and this might bring a tear to your eye as well, since the game starts when the wolf is a little cub and grows into an adult, where I sure hope that the wolf doesn't die since it will certainly break many hearts. Hot off the presses is the news that Rivals of Aether 2 will be releasing next month as well, where I caught wind of the news on the day this video is supposed to go live and had to make a quick edit to include it in the list. This is the sequel to perhaps the indie platform fighter trading in pixel art for a 2.5D look, which is not my preference, but I'm sure that they have their reasons for doing so. The original is a must-play for platform fighter fans, having an interesting elemental system and returning characters from the first game, where it appears that they are looking to make this some sort of platform, with 10 characters at launch, and all future characters being free, but will have cosmetic customization, but given the pedigree of this developer, it's a no-brainer pick. One of my most anticipated titles also makes it to launch in Drova Forsaken Kin, an open-world 2D pixel art action RPG that draws upon Celtic mythology and just looks fantastic. I have seen comparisons being made between this game and Gothic, although I don't know how accurate that is, but this is your classic fantasy fare of taking on quests, fighting monsters and bosses, getting loot and equipment, and taking on more difficult challenges. There are two major factions in the game, and you can choose to join either one, potentially opening it up for replayability, with the open world structure intriguing me the most since it feels rather old school in design, but brought to you by the magic that is indie games in 2024, and might potentially be Game of the Year material as well. One of the games which exploded in popularity during the most recent Steam Next Festival is Kill Knight, an arcade action shooter where you spawn into an arena and go ham on your enemies. Being of note, since while there are a ton of enemies, this is not a Vampire Survivor style roguelite, but rather something more classic in design. It is a high score chase type of game with global leaderboards, which I hope cheaters will not ruin, having awesome action and one of the sickest art styles that I have come across, with the main concern being the amount of content, but from the demo, it will at least be a great Devil Daggers style of game. The top 10 games in this list are really quite impressive, if I do say so myself, with the sandbox RPG Streets of Rogue 2 being one of the most highly anticipated sequels right now. The original was more roguelike in nature, which always felt like a strange fit to me, since you choose from an array of unique characters and progress through randomly generated cities, with the sequel looking to be more GTA-like in nature as you work towards toppling the corrupt president. However, while there is a main story mission, you can bugger off and do side missions or even tend to your own base, with multiple ways to tackle every situation, and the different ways that the game responds to you is the most interesting part. You can cause a zombie outbreak, play as an investment banker, ride a bear, captain a speedboat and more, with vastly improved pixel art which looks gorgeous and is a must play. I'm expecting this next release to absolutely blow up the charts as well, with the most impressive part being that this is not even a full game on its own, but rather paid DLC, where Factorial Space Age is a massive update to the Factory Builder Classic from 2020. Factorial fans love this shit, and the game is on a similar level to Stardew Valley or Terraria in the sense that I have seen entire YouTube channels being dedicated to this one game, with this DLC exploring what happens after you launch rockets into space and get off the main planet. And the answer, of course, is space factories. You are building on a platform which is limited in size, so you need to maximize every square inch of available space as you explore different worlds to get new materials to build better stuff. Also having a defense element since you need to shoot down asteroids, and based on how Factorial went, this should provide hours and hours of gameplay. Of course, I have to go with the sequel to a classic roguelite in Wizard of Legend 2, the spell-slinging action title with an insane number of spell options at your disposal. They have ditched the pixel art in favour of 3D, which again is not my preference, but it does look awesome with plenty of new arcana to play around with, although the fast-paced action and progression appears to be very similar. Interestingly, this is not from the original developers Contingent 99, but is now in the hands of Dead Mage, developer of Children of Morta, so I wouldn't worry too much since that game is great, so I'm excited to see their take on the IP. Watch this video for a ranking of the indie games published by Humble.